So let's get started with the biggest news coming out of last weekend was not actually Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, and Texas Christian making the college football playoff, but the announcement of Deion Sanders leaving Jackson State to become the new head coach at Colorado. And I have sung the praises of this hire. I've sung the praises of this hire because Deion did what he believes is best for him and best for his career, all right? I had said I wanted him to wait for something that was really outstanding, like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, somewhere in the upper echelon, the top tier of college football. But he decided to make the move to Colorado. And the more I look at this, the more I talk myself into it. Plus, there's no point in rehashing a point that you made that is no longer valid. It's why we change our opinions, because the facts on the ground change, right? One of the facts of life is that Deion Sanders being in Boulder, Colorado could not be more interesting to me, because I don't think I'm speaking out of school when I say Boulder, Colorado is one of the lily white places in all of this country. And it doesn't really feel like a place that is going to be ingratiating to Deion Sanders and Coach Prime's image until you unpack it, okay? So Colorado doesn't really have an identity, and it hasn't really been relevant since Joel Klatt played quarterback. And I don't know if you know, but he calls a college football game every now and again on Fox, and he's been doing that for quite a long time, okay? The other part about this that I find rather interesting is that Rick George, athletic director at Colorado, and Colorado had set themselves up to win the Deion Sanders sweepstakes. Why? Because they had hired not one, but two black head coaches before him. And you might not think that is a big deal, but I'm going to say that if you don't think that's a big deal, you're probably not black. I'm very black. I'm proud to be very black. And I looked at the dearth of college football coaches among the Power Five, and I look at the majority of the players being black, and I say there's an inequity here. We can fix this, right? The Pac-12 has actually, quite honestly, been really good about this. Herm Edwards was head coach at Arizona State. Kevin Sumlin was head coach at Arizona. And of course, we're talking about Carl Durrell, who was the last head coach, permanent head coach at Colorado. And I don't care if Carl Durrell did get fired. It's quite a thing to say you were succeeded by the greatest, or I should say one of the greatest American athletes of all time. Full stop. College football Hall of Famer, and NFL Pro Hall of Famer. The only dude that we can all remember going both ways, won Super Bowls, right? And is generally considered one of the most dynamic sports personalities, period. The man has been behind the chair. The man has been on the field. And now the man has been an outstanding football coach. So when he first got to Jackson State, one of the things that he said, he felt like he was called to Jackson State. And I went with that because I don't know what the man's heart was like. And I know that Jackson State could use him. And I wondered, like everybody else, could he actually win? I mean, it's Jackson State. It's an HBCU. They do not have the budget that you are used to seeing on the programs that we talk about most on this show, right? But he got there in the middle of a plague and turned out a winner. And not only did he turn out a winner, they won a SWAC championship. And then the next year, right, they were outstanding. And then this year, they are 12-0 with a SWAC championship, the best season they've had in school history. And that is at a place that is in the middle of a water crisis that also has its own facility problems. And you're asking, why is Deion Sanders deciding to leave this place that he had pledged to? Because he does what every other college football coach does. Nobody yelled at James Franklin when he left Vanderbilt to go to Penn State. Nobody yelled at Mel Tucker when he left Colorado to go to Michigan State. But all of a sudden, because Deion Sanders has decided to leave an HBCU, we have, shall we say, a fraught conversation. The way that I genuinely look at this is, what does it mean for the people involved? And then go from there. So what does it mean for Deion? It means he hits the backing and, quite frankly, the money of a Power 5 program that is itching to be relevant, that is itching to be in shows like this one, to come off the lips of the folks that you listen to talk about college football the most. Hiring Coach Prime does that. But I'm going to give it back to Bo Jackson on this when they were looking at him for Auburn, which is say, are you ready for the Coach Prime experience? And you got a piece of that in this widely disseminated viral video of Coach Prime showing up with cameras behind him to talk to the players that were at Colorado. Some of them will remain, not a lot of them will, when he said things will change. I brought my luggage and it's Louis. I'm bringing some dogs with me. One of which is the #1 recruit in the class of 2022, we think, right, in Travis Hunter. I'd be shocked if he doesn't end up at Colorado. And the other we know about. quarterback, Shedeur Sanders, a man some of y'all really love, and others, like your man Robert Griffin III, try to put into a Heisman conversation even as he plays in a lower division because he really is that good. Shedeur Sanders showing up to be quarterback Colorado is what you want, right? But it's also not unlike what I've seen in years past. And sometimes it blows up. When the coach makes his kid the quarterback, he either has to be really, really damn good or everybody's going to be on his head and on his father's head. And guess what Shedeur Sanders has turned out to be? Really, really damn good. And on the other side of the ball, his brother Shiloh ain't nothing to sneeze at, okay? So for Deion, it is absolutely the next step in his maturation as a head coach. And when you go 27-5 and you win 2 conference championships, you are a wanted man. And that's what happens when you are coaching at a lower division. Nobody said anything to Lance Leipold when he decided to go to Buffalo, coming from a lower division, right? But because of Deion, because of what he means to Black folks in particular, but what he means to the sport, all of this energy is coming to him. And I think some of it is quite frankly unfair. If you want to tell me that you disagree with his ability to move, I'm going to say, cool, that's fine. Disagree. But to shout it down, it's just wrong. I feel this personally myself because when I took this job, the same thing was said about me, right? I don't care about Oklahoma football anymore, which anybody working on this show could tell you is the farthest thing from the truth. But my job is to cover national college football conversation. That means talking about the things that reach the broadest amount of people. And it's really difficult to recruit to a place like Jackson State, not because of an HBCU, but because you go from 63 scholarships to 85 at Colorado. You go from perhaps having maybe $1 million at your disposal if you're lucky, right? If you're lucky, to having 10 times that at Colorado. What he will ask for, he will get. There will be no asking for it. It'll just be showing up, saying, what else do you need? We will get you everything you need to build a winner. And that's what he's going to do at Colorado. So what does that mean for Colorado? Man, they're going to have a good time. They're going to have such a damn good time because Prime is a party. And he's a party in such a way that we're already salivating at some of these games on Colorado's schedule. Like we have already identified USC is going to Colorado, that they have to play Nebraska, that they get to play Texas Christian in Fort Worth, which is frankly Deion Sanders' backyard, to open the season. You have never heard anybody be excited about Colorado football in this way. Not in your lifetime. We got to take it back to maybe Gary Barnett, maybe, maybe Cordell Stewart, maybe, maybe Michael Westbrook going over the top of Ty Law, his head, maybe. Nah, this is cause for celebration. And in the Pac-12, goodness me, you're going to watch USC, UCLA go out the door, and we're talking about your conference having to scrounge, if not being irrelevant in the years to come. And that was the preseason. By December, you are replacing Prime with USC head coach, you are replacing USC head coach Lincoln Riley with Prime, right? And to this point, I will say it again, I've been loud about it, okay? What Lincoln Riley did at USC, I expect Deion Sanders to do at Colorado. What he did was go into the portal with a quarterback that everybody wanted to play with already in the bag and say, do you want to play with us? Do you want to change the program? Do you want to turn this into the Mecca of college football? By the way, just as a side note, y'all can stop saying Mecca. It's a holy place. All right. Like let's stop using that one. All right. That's wrong. Like stop saying Mecca. Just say you wanted it to be the center of college football. And that's enough. So we're talking about Lincoln Riley being a change agent that wins 11 games and you feel let down by it. Holy smokes. They make the Pac-12 championship after going 4-8 and they get beat by Utah and they still might have the Heisman Trophy winner. Come on. That is on the table for Prime because Prime, like my favorite football coach of all time, Jimmy Johnson, said, no, I'm going to recruit and I'm going to let y'all play. Okay. As long as you play with integrity, you play with character, we will go win some football games. I'll take care of all the rest. All you got to do is follow the rules and go play hard. And that's what he has promised, right? And what they did at Jackson State was just that. They played hard. They beat everybody they played. And nobody has been close, frankly. And that's outstanding. So what does this mean for the sport? It means that now the SEC has to pay attention. The Big Ten has to pay attention. Every one of the 130 FBS programs is watching this with very, very close energy and close eyes. Like, the way I look at this is, let's say that he goes and does what Lincoln Riley does in the portal. And then you get to watch that in spring game. It also probably means we're going to be watching Colorado spring game on television, because this is the way to underline what Coach Prime was able to do at Jackson State. Normally, there are like 4 spring games that matter: Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Nebraska, right? Because Nebraska sells out spring game, and it's just what they do. Prime succeeded in getting Jackson State spring game on national television. I'm sorry, what? That's never happened before. And it probably will not happen again, because in our sport, it ain't the quarterbacks that move the needle, as much as we like to say. It's certainly not defensive players, because every time I try to talk about a defensive player, y'all not interested in Will Anderson. But what we are interested in is, what did Nick Saban do? What did Kirby Smart do? What is Jimbo Fisher going to do? What is Ryan Day going to do? And now, what is Prime going to do? Because he has ascended to the top of the hierarchy. And as far as, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, that's fun, but I want to see what that's going to be. And what is the ceiling for a Colorado? Winning. If they go 8-4 next year, nobody's going to be mad in Boulder. Okay? However, if HBCUs, in particular Jackson State, goes 8-4 next year, they'll go, we could have been 12-0. And they want to put that on Deion's head. And I disagree with that, because Deion didn't do anything that is untoward or controversial inside the sport. Coaches leave 18 hours after coaching their last game all the time. It's actually part of the schedule we look forward to the most, because we get the most to talk about. We get to talk about new coaching hires, new coordinators, new identities, new beginnings. But here, because Deion Sanders is black, and so very black, and loves talking about being black, we're going to talk about it as if it is something new. Nah, man. I understand being upset if you are a Jackson State fan, or even we're rooting for Jackson State, mainly just adjacent to a Jackson State fan, because your coach leaving you is something I'm familiar with. It happened to me 13 months ago, and it took some time to get over, and I wish Lincoln Riley well, but I do that. I don't know that the rest of the state does that. As a matter of fact, I'm sure the rest of the state feels some kind of way about Lincoln Riley going to LA, especially as this is a flyover state, and not a whole hell of a lot of people care about it unless our football team is amazing or there's been some natural disaster, right? So the way I look at how HBCUs feel, but Jackson State goes back to the 1970s. I think of college football as having become modern, not after World War II, but in 1970 with integration. And along with integration, we got to see, hey, these games actually matter, in that on Saturdays, you would have 2 teams play. One team would play, go this again, 1 game, 2 teams, right? So this bevy of games that we see now was not what you had. But those teams that played on those games got paid. The teams that didn't get paid. It's all about television revenue. So Division I AA come into fruition to basically satiate those 2 smaller programs and bigger programs. So with the bigger program, you have an opportunity to play on Saturday if you're Ohio State, Penn State, Alabama. But if you are Grambling, FAMU, Jackson State, probably not. So they said, you can choose to be Division I AA, or you can choose to be FBS. We will guarantee you some money in Division I AA, or you could take your shot at being the game of the week. Guess what? Jackson State's not going to beat out Ohio State or Oklahoma for one of those games, okay? So they took the money, which is what everybody else would do. And they were fine with that until it became clear that, A, that model was no longer sustainable. So in 1984, Georgia and Oklahoma sued the NCAA to break up this monopoly that it had on who got to say what games were being played. And then you get these new conferences that have banded together to negotiate the best television deal for their members. And the SWAC and the MEAC, for all intents and purposes, don't engage in those sorts of conversations because they don't have Ohio State, Alabama, or Oklahoma. They have what has been traditionally our schools. So ours being black folks, for the folks that can't see me on podcast. And they were our schools because these were the things that we needed during segregation. These were the places where we received our education. These are the places where we were able to learn the skills and trade to make for a better life when it was illegal for us to do such a thing until Brown v. Board of Education. So when people ask me, why do they still need HBCUs? Because that's our history. That is our heritage. That is our heart. I am one of just 2 people in my family that did not go to an HBCU. And the way I always looked at that was, okay, cool. I have family. I can go there. I can blend in, but it's never going to be the same because the community that folks talk about being at HBCU, when you were around like-minded people, but also people that understand you, understand how you come up. And you don't have to think about being the only Black person in a room. You don't have to think about, how am I going to explain to this person that it's just hard for me to go out at night, or that I'm afraid of police. At an HBCU, you were given an opportunity to find out what that was like. To see that go away, I think would be a tragedy. But the funding needs to be there. And frankly, there aren't enough Black folks in the world to just fund HBCUs. I'll say it in this way. It's about numbers. 7% of the United States is Black and male. 7%. We don't all play football. And even fewer go to HBCUs. So when you talk about big time donors, talk about billionaires and millionaires being able to shell out money to go get whatever coach they want, show me the ones that went to an HBCU. There's a billionaire who went to Morehouse. Morehouse's football team is not really what they're about. Show me that person at Jackson State, at Southern, Grambling, Prairie View A&M. It's difficult. It's hard because we opted for places like the University of Tulsa, Oklahoma, Texas, because the trappings are there. You are able to enter into a conversation that is much more inclined to hear what you have to say if you went to TU or OU. Everything else you have to fight and claw for. But your family, the people you rely on, that's your community. And so many of those people go to HBCUs for me. It's why you hear me throwing up the hooks, right? It's why you hear me talking about my mama throwing up that dynasty sign. It matters. I don't think that's going to change for Deion. Sure as hell not going to change for me. And I have worked really hard on really talking about the stuff I love on this show that I'm privileged to do. And I really love that primetime, Neon Deion, and all of the tall tales will be at the University of Colorado, because you're going to get to find out just what it means for one of our best to be over there with you. And I can't wait to find out what two Americas are like.